Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I see people are coming in from the waiting room, so I'll just give it another minute. But once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Power to Fly's Reach, Recruit, Retain event. Very excited to present to you 3 hours of interactive panel discussions today. We have some really great speakers lined up for you. So whether you can just stay for this session or all 3 hours, we are very grateful that you are joining us here today. And we're going to be getting into our first section on Reach, the importance of employer branding for a healthy talent pipeline in just a moment. But on the screen here, you can see our code of conduct, just so we all have a great conversation experience today. You can check that out. One thing I do like to point out is that the content shared during Power to Fly events is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice. For specific legal guidance, please consult a qualified attorney. I am also happy to say that today's event is eligible for both SHRM and HRCI credits, I should say. So there is your SHRM code. You can put that in for the HRCI credits. Please go to their website and select this event. If you have any difficulties with that, please reach out to Power to Fly. And speaking of Power to Fly, just want to tell you a little bit about us. We help organizations attract top talent and retain engaged employees with solutions that simplify recruitment, enhance employee satisfaction, and drive long-term business success. We are a 100% woman-led company backed by Morgan Stanley. And there you can see some of our amazing amount of our community there on the right side of the screen. But let me kick off and introduce you to today's panel, starting with myself. My name is Rob Rebar. I'm the Director of Events and Marketing at Power to Fly. I'm based in New York with 15 years of marketing and events experience. Here at Power to Fly, I lead our marketing and execution for events with top brands, and that includes our summits and our dedicated events and our chat and learns and many more. And joining me today will be my amazing colleague, Sienna J. Brown, VP of Growth here at Power to Fly. Sienna is the head of growth, and her mission is to build a new wave of leadership focused on inclusion and intention in the workplace so that every individual has an equal opportunity to reach their full potential. She'll also be moderating our third panel of today, so I know you'll love Sienna, so stick around, come back for that as well. And love to introduce one of our guest speakers today, Cecily Cici Esu, Senior Director of Consulting at Cielo. Cecily is a dynamic leader in talent acquisition innovation, heading a specialized team that delivers market-leading employer brand and recruitment marketing solutions. With over a decade of experience transforming talent acquisition strategies for high-profile organizations, she architects comprehensive talent attraction frameworks that drive measurable business outcomes. So thank you so much, Cece, for being here today. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about Cielo?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So excited and thrilled to be able to join today's conversation on employer branding for healthy talent pipeline. And today I'm representing Cielo Talent. And at Cielo, we've had the privilege of witnessing firsthand how strategic employer branding transforms talent acquisition outcomes, to Rob's point, across industries and markets worldwide. And our journey began in recruitment process outsourcing 20 years ago. We quickly recognized that sustainable talent success requires more than just efficient hiring processes. It really demands authentic connections between organizations and the talent they need. So today, Cielo partners with organizations globally to extend their talent reach through multiple solutions that span RPO, brand and tech consulting, executive search, and AI-powered digital tools, to name a few. And we're truly global in this approach with 18 locations worldwide, delivering across a client base that sits within 113 countries. So very energized by this work. We're able to see some amazing tangible impacts with organizations as they get talent acquisition right. Um, and I'm proud to say that CL has been consistently recognized by some of the leaders in the industry, such as HRO Today, Nelson Hall, Evis Group, recognizing and reflecting on our commitment to delivering measurable talent outcomes. So excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Cece. Can't wait to hear more from you in just a bit. And I want to introduce our other speaker, Christine Temple, who's the Chief Consulting Officer at Exactio. Exactio. Oh gosh, tongue twister
It's a mouthful.
there. She brings deep expertise in workforce planning, talent strategy, and organizational design. Her career began at Booz Allen Hamilton, the advertising government and military leaders, then expanded across hospitality and automotive industries with impactful roles at Marriott. My mother-in-law worked there, the Ritz-Carlton, Audi of America, and Volkswagen Credit. Returning to her consulting roots, Christine now helps redefine the employer relationship with a perspective she once valued as a client. Thank you so much, Christine, and I'd love to hear more about Exacquio.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And so that's a nice segue with the last line in my bio about, bringing a perspective that I once valued as a client. I was a client of Exacquios before I came to work here. And so just a fun fact about our name, Exacquio is derived loosely from the Latin exequeo. And so what that means is on equal footing. And we as a firm believe that every company is on equal footing and has an equal opportunity to define their authentic brand, authentic being the key word, and to tell the world about it and attract talent who will want to work there and who will thrive. And so the approach that we take is holistic from candidate to employee experience and looking at that entirety and understanding the experience as you transcend candidate into employee experience. We say that we're a consulting firm because all of us have a background from in-house. And so we are able to bring that balanced perspective of helping to solve your problem, but relating to being in your seat and in your shoes of understanding some of the challenges that you might face in-house of budgets or needing to coordinate across departments, things like that. You can see on the right-hand side what sets us apart, whether it's how we collect data and the kinds of questions that we ask to derive insights. I talked about the experience that we have, the strategies that we build really transcend just talent acquisition, employer brand, and expand across the experience that you might have as an employee. And then we're certainly all motivated to serve our clients. And you see some of our accolades there. Most recently, we're really proud last week that we won the first agency partner award delivered by the Rallies organization. So we're really proud of that and to be recognized for how we partner with our clients. I'm delighted to be here, Rob.
Well, congratulations to that. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Christine. And we're going to dive into today's conversation so we can take the slides down. I know some people were also looking for an HRCI code, so we'll definitely check your inboxes so we can make sure that we get that to you, and we'll share that SHRM code with you again as well. But I want to talk about today's first topic, which is reach, the importance of employer branding for a healthy talent pipeline. And Christine, I'll send this first question over to you, which is, how do you define employer branding in today's landscape? And why is it so crucial than ever before a role is even posted? Why is that branding like the first thing that a company should really be looking at?
That's a great question, and it's really connected to what I think is a brilliant title for this three-part series, right? So it is reach, essentially. But what many companies don't think about when they think about reach is where reach starts, right? So that first moment that I learn about Power to Fly, where do I learn about it? Who do I talk to? What do they tell me? And is it what I want them to be saying? Not from a scripted perspective, but from a understanding that authentic or lived employee experience. So we essentially say that your employer brand is marketing that authentic lived employee experience and marketing it and talking about it authentically, starting at candidates, right? Whenever they might discover you and discover you as an employer, you want them hearing and knowing what you are and how you operate from you and not interpreted from others. So it is table stakes especially in today's climate or anytime we see ups and downs in the employment, in the labor market and employment space. But that's really important. So employer branding concisely is marketing and talking about that authentic lived experience. So people can hear about it from you and opt in or opt out, right? Sometimes we don't like to say that in HR and in recruiting, but you want people who read that and lean in and go, "Ooh, tell me more." And those are the individuals who see something in what they've learned that reflects their values around work, reflects how they want to work and intrigues them. And you want those people, you want to grab those people and you want them to hear about you and lean in and want to get more and more.
I love that because we always like to say here at Power to Fly, don't feel bad if the people don't lean in because they're not going to be probably a right fit for you either. It's that two-way street. Then it's the people that
Absolutely.
lean in that you really want to cultivate. So I love that, Christine. And I'll
Yeah.
send the next question over to you, Cece, and then also love Sienna to hear from you on this because people are constantly being bombarded with news and information. I'm sure everyone on the line would agree with this. Email inboxes are full, and a person might be on one social media platform, might not be on another. So, how can companies cut through this noise and truly reach their key profiles? Cece, let's start with you.
Ugh, and that is such a brilliant question, Rob, because you may have just highlighted one of the most significant challenges in modern talent attraction, the attention economy. So as you noted, we all are very aware of how inundated we all are. And it's actually estimated in this point in time, the average person encounters hundreds of messages daily. So the traditional, broadcast approach to talent attraction and employer brand management simply doesn't work anymore. In fact, I just read this week actually. Our digital environment is so saturated. 2025 is the first year we've actually seen a decrease in our media consumption since the Great Recession, which is crazy. And that's both within the US and worldwide. So, fun fact of the day. So in my experience, and I'll try to summarize this, cutting through the noise requires three fundamental shifts in how you approach talent communication. The first is audience precision. So the most effective employer brand strategies use data-driven audience segmentation. So being as descriptive and intentional as possible with who your ideal candidate persona is from a demographic, geographic, psychographic, and skill set perspective. The more precise you are and you're able to build, the more intricate you can be with your audience targeting, as well as the aligned omni-channel plan to reach those individuals. I have a few fun examples, but I'll leave those to the end if we have time. The second fundamental area is value first communication. So today's talent expects something of value before they're willing to give you their attention. And this means shifting from the continual we're hiring messages to content that serves your professional's interests. So one methodology I like to promote is the 80-20 content rule. So 80% of your external messaging development should pertain to valuable industry insights, career development resources, authentic workplace stories. And the latter 20% can be more direct recruitment marketing messaging, and in that order. So you can build awareness, you can build sentiment, drive engagement, and then get to a place where you can convert them.
I love that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. And then last, because ultimately this may be the most important, and then I'll pause. But using your employees for authentic distribution. So your employees remain your most credible and effective communication channel. Their networks typically contain people with similar skill sets and values, which are exactly the profiles we're usually trying to reach. So ensuring you are equipping your employees with easy to share, authentic content about their work experiences. That's really going to help you reach talent that might not engage with your corporate channels, and do so with built-in credibility.
I love that last point
Yeah,
because I think that's something that's very easy for us to forget. And I'm also thinking maybe there's ways organizations can gamify that for their teams as well. Give out some
absolutely.
some swag or something like that, or gift certificates. And I'm also thinking, to your second point, that's something we do here always at Power to Fly for our summits and chat and learns for our sponsors. We always say, don't talk about your company necessarily. Don't talk necessarily about, oh, I'm hiring for this role. Instead, use this opportunity to do some upskilling, to do some professional development. And then at the end, say, oh, by the way, we're also hiring. But you want to kind of lead with that idea of like, this is the kind of upskilling, this is the kind of professional development you're going to get at X company.
100%. This is who we are. Come join us. Yeah. And then
Exactly.
people will be knocking on your door. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Sienna, I'd love to throw this same question over to you. What are your thoughts on kind of cutting through the noise?
Yeah, I love this. And just plus one to everything that Christina and Cece were just sharing. I think the three things that I really think about is clarity over volume. While yes, we need to have a high amount of volume marketing touch points with individuals, really focusing on how does your brand or organization focus on clarity, authenticity, and emotional resonance. So what does someone feel when they learn about, read on your, or on your careers page, read a social media post, what resonates with them, and how can you really do that in a way that's consistent and clear across the board? But I think the other thing that's really important to think about is how are you meeting individuals where they are? And so while of course we're talking about attracting top talent, thinking about how are you finding top talent that might not have necessarily been considering your organization. But I love using Duolingo as a great example. Duolingo does a fantastic job at meeting individuals where they're at and resonating with their core audience, where I've heard a lot of stories of individuals seeing a thread, loving it so much that they again say, Duolingo.
Uh-oh.
We might
I
have.
think she paused.
Oh, no.
It's okay, we were
Oh, there
talking
you go.
about
You're
the
back.
power
Okay, yeah.
outage. I'm
Big
back.
word.
But Duolingo is a great example of meeting people where they're at and speaking their language, but having that clarity where they're able to have that consistency. And the last thing that I would say is really building trust through own channels. And of course, we're talking very high level social media, ads, etc. But how are you nurturing talent communities? How are you giving insightful, value-driven newsletters? How are you having those strong career sites on your platforms? But then also thinking about how are you building long-term relationships, because you might have top quality talent that aren't ready to join you yet, but in 6 to 8 months they might be. So always being able to make sure that you're providing value and staying top of mind for the people that you want to be attracting.
I think that last point is so key to Sienna, because we are always saying here, if you are if you are good at what you do, you're might very well likely to be gainfully employed. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be looking for a new opportunity 4, 6, 12 months down the line. So keeping that pipeline warm through some of the things you mentioned, like newsletters, events. So thank you so much. And Christine, love to bring you back into the conversation with this next question, which is, how can companies maintain a strong and consistent brand while also tailoring their messaging to different markets, demographics, and geographies? Because I know one thing that we talk about here at Power to Fly is what a talent might be looking for in the US is not necessarily what a talent is looking for in India, for example.
Absolutely. Well, there's two parts to that question, so I love to break it down. The first part is, how do you maintain a strong brand? And I'm a big fan of keeping things simple. And my esteemed colleagues here have said what I'm about to say in their own words, but I've used this or said this a couple of different times, and we say it internally. When you're authentic, you have no competition. So the first aspect of managing your employer brand is making sure you're authentic. A lot of times we do this, we look outside. Ooh, so and so just did. I just saw so and so launch. So and so just did this cool employee video, right? And that inspires us to oftentimes replicate. And that's not the strategy we want to employ. So I would say, first, make sure you're staying authentic to you. How do you do that to therefore tailor messages? Everyone who knows me knows I love food, so I have to use a food analogy because I can't help myself. So I was thinking, at the end of the day, the second strategy I'm going to give you, second and third together, are tied to this example, which is one, being clear on your focus and purpose and not trying to be all things, which we got at a little bit about attracting key talent and making sure you're talking to the talent who will resonate with your message and opt in or will be repelled by and opt out of wanting to work. And then the second part is needing to manage and actively maintain your brand. Sometimes we forget that. We get excited about the launch, we get excited about the big splash, we get excited about the metrics from the first 3 to 6 months, but it has to be actively managed, whether it is a dedicated team or it is a matrix of individuals across the organization, someone who owns social, parts of it who own internal comms and pulling that through internally, others who own partnering with agencies who do your spend and media buy, whatever that looks like, but it needs to be actively managed and tracked. And so I use this example because it drives home, which is I want to start a Caribbean restaurant, right? So I've done the research to know that there are not a lot of Caribbean restaurants with an X number of demographic or perhaps serving a particular type. Maybe all of them are doing Jamaican and I want to do Trinidadian food. I'll make that up. And so when you tie that to employer branding, number one, you've got clarity, you've done your research, right? And so building an employer brand, you're researching and talking internally to understand that authentic experience that's lived, but you're also understanding the external market. So you're understanding who you want to attract in the future. What do they want and need? And how do you tailor, not embellish, but talk about, amplify the things that are true about your employment experience to them? So I've done my research and know there aren't any Trinidadian specifically type restaurants around here. So I've got now a specific talking point that I'm going to take it from Caribbean restaurant to specifically Trinidad because that might attract certain people. And once you do that, you've also decided on what the menu is going to be. You're going to have it authentic. So if you're looking for dim sum, I'm unapologetic about the fact we don't serve that here. But what you might do is think about within that, how can you introduce or bring others into that cuisine who have certain dietary restrictions? So maybe you have some dishes that are vegetarian, still using the spices and flavors and things that are familiar, but making sure that you have food that aligns to those individuals, right? Sorry if I'm making anybody hungry, but also you have your traditional meat dishes and things like that, but you're staying within the palate and the profile, but you're allowing yourself to sort of, I'm using my hands like an elastic band that you can stretch your menu and your palate to introduce those who have different dietary needs or experiences. Maybe some foods can be dialed up in spice for those who have a higher tolerance, right? And so use that example, companies, you want to stay and be unapologetic, right? Because we've been to buffets and they're okay, but they're not great, right? Because they do a lot of things, but probably not all of them really well. And so being unapologetic that this is the cuisine we serve, and here's how we can stretch that to meet the needs. Vegetarian, high spice, I don't eat pork, great, we have chicken dish, right? Whatever those things might be. And so similarly, as we think about employer branding, we're unapologetic about our cuisine, but we're knowledgeable about the needs of our market that we can talk about and go, oh, you can still experience this type of Caribbean cuisine, even if you don't eat meat, right? And allowing to have those messages be tailored.
I love that. Yes, and I'm sure everyone listening is very
Food, my
hungry
brain
right
thinks about
now.
food.
But no, I think that goes back to so much of what I'm hearing from all of you is doing your research, data driven, all these things, and then having that be the driving force to make these decisions. So I love that.
Absolutely.
And definitely, if anyone has questions for our speakers, feel free to let us know. I'm happy to get to as many of those as possible. But Cece, want to send things over to you because you've led employer branding strategies across many different industries, healthcare to tech. So, what are some sector specific challenges or considerations in employer branding?
Oh, I just adore that question, Rob. So, one of the most fascinating insights I've gained working across multiple industries is just how powerfully sector reputations shapes candidate perceptions before they ever encounter a specific employer brand. To give an example, I remember leading a rebranding effort at a healthcare organization where we discovered that 78% of the organization's employees had decided to pursue a healthcare career before they'd ever considered, which organization they were going to join. And this really reinforces what global talent surveys continually show us, which is people join an industry first and then they choose a company, which I always just found so fascinating. And what I'm experiencing right now is a bit of a tale of two worlds in employer branding. On one side, we have sectors like clean energy, healthcare and medical technology, and yes, elephant in the room, AI, that are absolutely magnetic for talent. A few months ago, I have a colleague that I connected with in climate tech, and she just posted a role and they received over 1,200 applications for a sustainability analyst without even advertising. You know, these industries are just winning right now because they're offering what today's talent craves, which is meaningful purpose connected to current, real life, urgent global challenges, um, you know, clear growth potential, and then just that excitement of innovation balanced with actual stability. On the flip side, I'm working with clients and have worked with clients in more of the, you know, traditional retail, commercial real estate, conventional banking, even. And they're facing some serious headwinds in talent attraction. And the challenge runs deeper than, you know, compensation or working conditions. It's really more about the perceived relevance, and the future viability of these industries who are, you know, historically known for being resistant to change. But no, all doom and gloom, you know, even in these sectors, organizations um, that authentically acknowledge industry challenges, who demonstrate how their organization is addressing sector-wide issues, and who can connect the individual roles to broader industry transformation, you know, really can differentiate themselves and even showcase how they're working to transform the industry and industry challenges. So that's some of the larger themes I'm seeing current state. And of course, if we look ahead, you know, on the next frontier, I think as it pertains to employer branding, there's an element that will center on AI ethics and governance across sectors, with organizations that demonstrate transparency and ethical use of AI in their talent processes, building trust that translates directly into recruitment success. So definitely an element for everyone to keep top of mind as we all embark on more and more AI governance conversations. But ultimately, no matter what organization you and your company sit within, the most powerful employer brands I've ever been able or had the pleasure of working with, they don't hide from their industry. They lean into it, they embrace it, while showcasing how they're either exemplifying the best aspects, or actively working to transform its challenges.
I love that. When we ran our What Talent Wants survey earlier this year, some of the things that you mentioned there, especially things about growth potential, whether that be for the individual professional or maybe the industry as a whole, that was actually topping things like salary, actually.
Oh,
So I think
100%.
if some of
Yeah.
those maybe traditional industries that you're mentioning that might be struggling now can really highlight, you know, as you're saying, this is how we're dealing with the future. And also, this is how you can grow. This is how you can make this not just a job, but a lasting career here. I think those kind of things will really resonate with job seekers.
100%. And, you know, I promise we all didn't practice before we came together, but I think we hear the trends of authenticity and transparency. And I think that couldn't be any more valid, even in this case. People want to hear you leaning into the challenges, or actually, we didn't do this well, but hey, we're vocalizing it. And this is what we're doing to lean into it to solve it and be part of this journey with us. So absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. And Sienna, over to you. Kind of a similar question I was asking Christine about, but you've worked with many global organizations, and how can companies ensure their employer brand resonates across different cultures while still feeling unified, still have that voice? And of course, you're actually based in Spain, so you have a very unique perspective on this as someone with a very who's lived in a very global environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that cross-cultural understanding is something that's so important, Christine. And going back to your Trini restaurant idea, and something that I was thinking
Sorry.
about. No, 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 I love it. As you were sharing is like almost, and this might be useful for anyone who's listening in, but like And what is that story? I might be talking about Trinidadian food very differently to very different demographics, where it might be reconnecting with your culture and your roots versus understanding the vibrancy of the culture through food. And so, I mean, I love that example because I think when we think about what does this look like on a global perspective as well, it's having core brand roots, but then also learning and understanding local expression, right? So thinking about what is your core brand DNA, your values, your purpose, your tone, while also giving flexibility on how do we express this in different markets and for different regional locations and also demographics. And I think something that's really important as well is co-creating with local voices. Because as we're thinking about authenticity and also transparency, me trying to sit here and talk about Trinidadian culture, I might not be the best person to do it. My mother, who has been to a lot of Trinidadian carnivals and knows the culture, might be able to do that much better. But I think it's really important for us to also connect and understand with our employees if we have folks who are in different regions, and then if not, taking time to properly do the research, not just through data and study, but having conversations with individuals, really being able to dive in and learn on a deeper level so that we're not being performative as well when we're trying to have local expression, but really being able to say, we see you, we understand you, and we speak your language, metaphorically, or maybe in real life as well. I think the other thing that's really important to think about it is culture as a lens, not a filter. And I think especially in this day and age, it's something that's really important to think about. Instead of saying different cultures or regions make us different or pull us apart, it's almost saying, how do we understand and have a deeper concept of core concepts like leadership, flexibility, success, and understanding how does that again align with your core pillars. And so I'll use myself as an example. I've worked with a lot of different organizations that might have teams in Sweden, whatever, I'm using random countries, right? But Sweden, the Dominican Republic, Spain, and Canada. Those individuals in different regions might have different holidays or might have a different frequency of national holidays. They might have different values. They might have different working hours. How are we making sure that we're creating a comprehensive brand DNA in the way that we work, but that's also able to allow for the flexibility that other individuals might have? And the third thing I would say again is, how do we focus on shared human truths? Right. So as you're building your global brand narrative, almost everyone wants the same thing. They want to have a sentiment of purpose. They want to feel as if they belong in the organization that they are going to be working in. They want to feel as if they can grow in their personal and professional lives. And also they want to feel recognized, as an example. And thinking about how those things transcend beyond geography or demographics, but really being able to say, how are we creating expressions of those truths? And then being able to adapt or shift those narratives to be able to really resonate with the people that we're looking to attract.
I love all that. Yeah, I think I would imagine a lot of people on the line might agree with this, but if you're working for an international organization or company, like it can be very easy to become US centric there and like, oh, let's talk about, what's happening in the US. So I love like the idea of like finding these other big things that can kind of unite us all throughout and talking about those issues. So I love that. And we've got some great questions here from Tatiana. I'm going to start with one and then we'll see if we can circle back to more. I'll throw this out to whoever on the panel wants to go first. But their first question was, if a company is undergoing a serious transformation, and many, I'm sure, companies are right now for various reasons, what it has today cannot be the basis for positioning. It needs a serious renewal to attract a new type of employee to motivate and develop their own. What is the best way to do this? So wonder anyone who wants to kind of take that. Maybe yes, Christine, go first, please.
I'd love, because we've encountered a number of clients who've come to us to help build their employer brand or help refresh their employer brand, who are going through transformation at the moment. And so sometimes they say, do we have anything good to talk about or market? Or, if we're in a state of transition, it might feel messy. It might feel a little bit chaotic organizationally. And our advice, staying true to our perspective about authenticity, but the way we've helped our clients navigate that is And it's similar to what CC said, or both CC and Sienna said about sort of honing in on some of the truisms of today. Even if you're transitioning or changing, there's probably aspects of who you are that's staying the same. Number one. Number two, also, don't be afraid to talk about where you're going. People
Mhm.
want to hear that too, right? So your employer brand might be more about where you're heading than who you are today. Some companies can say, this is who we are, come work here, and we're innovative and fun and all these things, Duolingo, whatever those companies are that we hear about, Netflix, Salesforce. And but there is vulnerability and authenticity in talking about where you're going and being part of that. We're not there yet, but we invite you to be part of this if this journey, if this vision is appealing to you. And so, whether we've had clients who are divesting parts of their business, changing their business in some way fundamentally, or just through a transformation or org design shifts and things like that. But don't be afraid of that. And I know my panelists have said that. Like that is the word of the day is authenticity. Whether it's authentic about the great things or the transitory things that are happening in your organization. People aren't, they know that. They know things aren't fixed and static, and they want to hear about that. And if your talent acquisition professionals are equipped to talk about the journey, sound excited about it, like, yeah, is everything figured out right now? No, right? You might come in and we might be in between a technology transformation or in between X. But what's fun about it is we have a good time, or we enjoy our contribution, or we know this won't last forever, whatever those talking points are. People want to hear that. And a lot of people opt in and I want to part of that too. I don't mind messy. I don't mind being in the middle of a little bit of chaos. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. I love all that. And Cece, love your thoughts here. And also the other question Tatiana was bringing up, I think ties well into this question and also to what you were saying before. They were saying about how can companies properly work out when the outdated image dominates. You were talking about working for some of the,
Mm.
working with some industries where that might be. One example that's coming up in my head that we've encountered here, Power to Fly, is like sales roles. And there's still almost like a male dominated, like
Yeah.
cigars and whiskey sales ideology that kind of comes up there. So what are your thoughts on that when an old image kind of needs to be removed?
Yeah. Oh, so another two-part question. So I think, for the first part, and I can only add on to Christine's answer because that was fantastic. But I like to sometimes simplify, the definition of employer branding as, you know, it's also the promise an organization makes its employees for their commitment. Then more importantly, the manage of that reputation surrounding that promise. Because one of my favorite elements to point out when we're initiating any new partner relationship is everyone has an employer brand, whether you manage it or not. Like brands are very similar to reputations. They're defined by people's perceptions, whether those are positive or negative, true or untrue, direct experience or hearsay. I mean, we can all take a peek. Speaking of restaurants, we can take a peek at Yelp to see this concept in fruition. But it's that employer brand management, the art to the science, to Christine's point of coordinating all of the people and recruitment activities from talent management to onboarding that really drive that competitive advantage in attracting talent, as well as delivering, greater impact across larger company success, everything from employee engagement to revenue growth. And if we shift that specifically to, let market perception or industry perception, um, it's how to again lean into the industry and transformational challenges that your organization may be facing. So, for example, if we take some of those who quote unquote are on the flip side right now, it's looking at manufacturing, right? And how can we shift the narratives away from automation threats to how we help our employees advance their careers, and we've built pathways, and here they are. Here's, real life examples. Or financial services. It could be overcoming legacy perceptions to showcasing digital transformation. And even healthcare, it is kind of that one teeters. There's still a lot of talk about, healthcare professionals and addressing the burnout. So address that burnout narrative, but maintain and maybe lean further into that connection to the patient, to the purpose, to the mission. I think, taking all of these elements and just thinking first through the aspiration, again, to Christine's point, but also remaining authentic is going to help you develop the strategic roadmap to kind of stepping through any next steps when it comes to your employer brand and the management of it.
Thank you. One thing that you said that's really struck me is that like every company has a brand, and like some
I
people
love that.
might
I'm
not be
sorry. I
okay.
use it all the time because
Oh,
it's
I might
true.
not have a brand,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I love that. And I also think the real life examples are so great. Like get some employee testimonials and customer testimonials, all that stuff.
Mhm.
Video, obviously video is king these days. So I love all that. Um, and if there's any more questions for our speakers, we've got about 20 minutes left. So feel free to add those to the chat. Love to get to them as well. And also my colleague said I added some instructions for HRCI credits. So check that out and continue to introduce yourselves as well. I love that also. But
Rob,
Sienna,
I'd love to add to
oh yeah,
Stacey's
please,
point
Christine,
just
go away.
just
Go
really
ahead.
quickly, because that is such a well said statement of every employer has a brand, whether you know it or not. And one of the things that I've found is sometimes the bigger the brand, the bigger the company, the more they don't necessarily think about their employer brand. So your big and well-known companies sometimes depend on the consumer brand to drive that traffic and awareness. And those are two different experiences, right? I'm picking on a company I've never worked with and have not consulted to, Nike. People might know a lot about Nike, right? And their consumer brand. But what the lived experience to create the products that help propel performance, whether you're an athlete or you're just a novice, someone who's desiring to work out or training for their first marathon, right? Nike sort of says we can help you on all aspects of that performance continuum. But what is it like to actually produce those products? What does it mean to work there? And many of us fall in love from an employment perspective with the consumer, not knowing the employer side. And I think you have to work harder, particularly in those industries, to make sure the message is clear and differentiated of what the product will do for me versus what the work experience feels and looks like, and actively managing both of those to be authentic. So that just inspired my thought, CC, to
Sienna.
say that. And Sienna.
Yeah, no. I love this. I want to hop in
We're
as
going
well.
off script, Rob. Sorry.
Rob, we're on a roll. We got
Yeah.
this. No, I'm just joking. But I do want to hop in just because I think both of the questions that Cece and Christine were talking about were really important. And I also heard a little bit of what are some tactical things. So for any of you who might actually be going through a process, whether it's through a rebrand, working on revamping the brand message, I just want to share at Power to Fly, ironically enough, we actually went through this process. I led this process over the last quarter into where we're at now. And similar to what we were talking about, we actually created a blog post where, as we were sharing thought leadership on what this could look like for other organizations, talking about our process. And I think something that's really important in these processes is how are we also getting employee buy-in, right? Because when we're thinking about that employee experience of our brand just went from A to B and I had no idea, and now I have to go sell something completely different, is very different versus I was a part of the process and I was brought along the way the entire way through. And so a couple of really tactical things that you all can think about. I break it down into like 3 core buckets, right? Number 1, obviously doing market research of understanding, yes, where is it that the organization and the brand want to be going, but also how does this play into what does the market look like now and what will it look like in 5 to 10 years? The second part would also be doing a really deep client analysis as well, of being able to say, what is it that our clients are saying about what they love about us, what they wish we could do better? How are we also comparing that to data to back up the decisions that we're making? But then the third part is also understanding from your employees. And it's really interesting because as we went through this process, as we were asking different individuals in the organization, a lot of different people had a lot of different answers depending on what department or what role they held. And so it was almost like a come to the light moment of having an OR call where we talked about, hey, this is where we were and these are all the different perspectives. These were your insights from a survey that we put out internally to hear, where do you see our brand in 5 to 7 years? What have you heard that will really be able to help us stand out in the market? And then really having small iterations in the process, even if it has to happen rapidly. It can be a Slack message, it can be 5 minutes in an organizational call, but really telling people, here's where we're at, here's what we're finding, here's where we're headed, here's how your role plays a part in what this looks like moving forward. Because again, I think oftentimes these decisions happen in silos or maybe only with leadership. And so what happens is you might think you've made a shift in your brand, in your employer brand, but in reality, if the 500 people or 5 people in your organization are still saying different things, then we haven't really closed the loop on what we think we've done. And so I really think one of the most impactful ways is bringing people along the process and also having their voices be heard. And then again, that goes back to the authenticity and the transparency. And then when it gets to telling that external story, it won't just be sharing it on the company page, but you then have all of your employees bought in and excited on where the organization is heading, so that it's able to have that ripple effect that really allow for people to not just be a part of the journey, but feel as if it's tied to their purpose, to feeling seen, etc. Okay, Rob.
No, I love that.
that.
One very simple exercise that we actually did here at Power to Fly and that everyone can do is like have your employees in one sentence say, what does your company do? What is your mission statement of your company? I bet you're going to, if you have 500 people, you might get close to 500 responses. And if you're getting those from the people that work for your company, what are the external people who don't have insight into the day-to-day looking at? Or even on a customer level, we're not talking about that, but that certainly translates to that world as well. So love all of this. And we do have some more questions from folks on the line. Love Jenny's question, because a lot of the things we're talking about might apply to big companies, but Jenny is asking for a smaller startup with limited bandwidth. What are the most important things to focus on? So throw that out to whoever likes to go first.
Okay, I
I
can,
see
so,
thinking.
yeah, I can, yeah, I know, the wheels are spinning, all right, but yeah, and I've, definitely had, I've worked with a small business administration, so I've had some experience, working with clients with limited infrastructure, so to speak. And my advice is really just to focus on maximizing existing resources and data sources that you have on hand that require minimal investment, but provide the most significant impact. But to focus it on a single business outcome, I think oftentimes we try to boil the ocean. So single is really the key word here, because by identifying, one critical talent challenge. So if it's reducing time to fill or increasing market penetration, whatever it is, you can continue and progressively build a measurement and employer brand strategy around that challenge, versus trying to, spread yourself too thin. And more often than not, that leads to a scalable wireframe that can be utilized across your larger employer brand, EVP activation, recruitment marketing infrastructure. And if you need somewhere to start, no matter where you are, you can garner a pretty solid evaluation of your employer brand effectiveness by looking at 3 critical assessment categories. So the first is, EVP, employer brand, territory. We've talked about industry, so territory and content. So evaluating what you're communicating about your company and values across channels. The second is candidate experience. So measuring how effectively candidates can engage with you, your organization throughout the application process. And then the third is, your reputation and sentiment. So assessing how your organization is perceived by employees, candidates, and the broader community, very much to Sienna's point. And by focusing on these 3 elements, at least to get started high level, so content, experience, and reputation, you can really develop actionable insights and start to make informed decisions on where to invest your resources and your budget for maximum impact on both talent attraction and retention. So very high level
Rob,
answer, but yeah.
I was just going to add on to Cece's point because I think it's a great one for someone asking, and it can feel daunting if you're starting or even coming into it. Like if the company's starting or you are new coming into the role and trying to help, and you're small and you think I don't have a lot of resources. We tell our clients all the time, employer brand is inherently multidisciplinary. So first start with, understanding, right? It touches, if you don't sit in, it touches aspects of talent acquisition. It touches, your talent management teams, onboarding, learning and development. It touches brand and marketing. It touches social. It touches, your compliance. It touches so many different functions within a company. Sit down and have conversations to understand what they're doing today and how you can cross utilize, right? How you can support one another because they've got budgets and they've got priorities and you want to just plug on in, right? What if we did X, right? And expanded your thing from this to this? You're already paying for it. Love that. You're already funding it. But how can my content or how can I leverage that for my purposes? So also think about that in addition to kind of not boiling the ocean, which I think is great advice from Cece. But remember, it's cross-disciplinary. It's inherently so. And so use those disciplines and partnerships to your advantage.
I love that. I'm also going to use not boiling the ocean like in every day of my life because I've never heard that phrase and I'm totally stealing it.
Oh,
But,
love it.
but
Yay.
and I love, Sienna, to throw this next question to you because I think we'd
Yeah.
be remiss without talking about kind of DEI, DIB right now in terms of employer branding. Before you let our growth team here, you started Power to Fly's DEIB team. So JN in the chat was asking, given the current landscape where DEI is both under scrutiny and support, how should an employer brand approach taking a public stance? Is it better to stay neutral, or is it having a clear point of view now more important than ever for attracting the right talent?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and I'm going to be conscious of time just because I think, especially in the media, we've seen in the last few months the impact of when it's done well versus when it's not, and also the bottom line and how that's been impacted. But I think the most important thing that I want to say is that, again, thinking about authenticity and transparency, more than anything, what you don't want to do is do something that is performative, right? And so the first question that if I were you, I would ask yourself and key decision makers or stakeholders in the organization, why do we want to do this? And does this feel true to our organization? Because I think something, especially when we're thinking about talent and also consumers, is folks are very aware, right? So if your organization has never talked about inclusion and then now you launch an inclusion campaign, you might be not to be like not scare tactics, right? But like you might be under a little bit more of a deeper magnifying glass. And I think we saw this in 2020 as well. And so I think something that's really important going back to brand DNA and brand values is how are you making inclusion a core thread and not a campaign? Right? And so thinking about what does that mean, not just in a social post or not just in a blog post, but what does that look like in the day-to-day? How do we respect the other individuals that we work with? How do we center inclusion at our organization? And when we think about that sentiment, again, core needs that many people have, belonging, purpose, feeling as if individuals and be their best selves in the place that they're working. How is that being reflected in all of our messagings in everything from job descriptions to leadership communications? And so almost thinking about, is this a core part of our DNA? Is this a core part of the way that we work in our organization? And then how do we want to communicate that in a way that feels intentional and not one-off? And I think the other thing that's really important here, and we've talked a lot about employee experience, but really recognizing and centering lived experience as your strongest proof point, right? If anyone were to go and ask anyone in your organization, hey, I'll use myself as an example. Hey, what has your experience been like as a Black woman of color with a disability who lives in a different country than the majority of the organization? What I will say will have a lot more weight than what someone might read in a social post. And so I think, again, it really goes back into what does that day-to-day look like? And I think something else that's really interesting as well is, especially in the talent interview process, where that is a really great way to be able to hear about lived experiences, be able to, I don't want to just say see representation because diversity goes so much deeper than what we see, but to be able to hear about different lived experiences and thinking about really how can the company foster an organization where inclusivity is at the center, and also people would genuinely recommend the company and almost do the work for you, talking about what that looks like. And so hopefully that helps. But I think really thinking about what does that look like, embedding it in the day-to-day versus thinking about, do we create a statement or do we not? But then if you do, doing that with transparency and also authenticity with who the organization is and what they stand in value for.
Yeah,
That's
I love that.
important.
And I'd also just add in there too that like DEIB, it's been kind of boiled down in the media to mean a very specific thing. But flexible work is DEIB, mental health or wellness opportunities are DEIB. So whether you're not moving, maybe if you're moving away from some of those traditional terms or other regions that you've been sitting at, but your company offers a lot of flexible work, like then you should be highlighting that as well. And I think leading with that in terms of making it a very inclusive workplace. So, real quick, lightning round question for you all before I let you go. I loved also JN's question that we're focusing on employer branding today, but what are some personal branding tips you'd give employees or job seekers? I'd also say that personal branding is employer branding because I know everyone is looking at your LinkedIn all the time. Like, so what you have on there is not just for yourself, it's for your company as well. So just maybe just real lightning quick, any thoughts on this kind of personal branding? What should people be doing in that regard?
I will jump in first and say two things. One is the same thing around authenticity. People ask me, I live in the Metro DC area, so I've a good amount of my personal network affected by being let go or changes in their employment status locally. And it's the same thing. There's no template to tell your story. A resume is an introduction of who you are. Introduce yourself. How do you want to do that? Right. And please start first yourself and don't ask AI to do it for you. Because we can tell when you read it, right? But that's the first part. And sometimes I think we're scared because we follow the template of, well, should it be chronological? Should it be this? It should be you. Right. And so I've advised people sometimes I pull in a word or a quote. I've had every performance review I've ever been given in my career because it helps me sometimes in other people's words remember what's great about me. And so pull that in. If there's a quote or, Christine builds rapport, she's easy to talk to, or whatever, don't be ashamed to put that in there as you talk about a skill set or a capability that you bring to a company, right? It doesn't need to feel robotic and templatized, but be the first part around your brand is let it reflect you, whether it's the interview, your resume, or any digital assets about your professionalism, let it reflect you authentically. Have fun. Doesn't need to be templatized.
I love this. I'll go next then. Oh, Cece,
Okay.
do you want to go?
I'll bring her home. No, I'll
Okay,
finish.
okay, I
Go
love
ahead.
it.
Yeah.
I'll be really quick for time, but I would say three things. Like, number one, sharing your story, but also owning your story and your expertise, right? And learning how to position that past experience for where you want to be going. So let's say that you might have gotten laid off or you were in a different market or whatnot. Where do you want to be headed? And how can you start creating that story so that others can view you where you want to be? And the other thing that I would say is really being, give me a second, but I think this is really important, of like being unapologetic about sharing your voice and your unique perspective. Because I think that that's something that's so important, where yes, people might hire you for your resume, but if you're giving a really unique perspective on something that you see differently in the market or in the trends of where something is going, and someone sees that, I might want to engage with you, set up a call, interview for something, versus you sharing your story or keeping it for yourself or waiting until those moments. And so really thinking about what are ways that you can start practicing in small ways your voice, your perspective, or your point of view that will be able to almost attract with your personal brand different opportunities that you might not even know exist. And the last thing before I pass it over to CC, fostering connections before you need them. And I say fostering connections and not networking, because I think something that's so important is that when we're able to really resonate, connect with other individuals within organizations or almost across, not always networking up, but building core relationships, because oftentimes there might be job opportunities that you won't see on LinkedIn or Power to Fly or wherever it might be before having a conversation with someone and understanding what opportunities they might know. And Cece, bring us home, please.
Oh gosh. Oh no. I mean, I'm just fascinated with what both of you have said, and I just think it's so relevant, that question right now, because if we think about where employer branding is going in the next 5 to 10 years, and people laugh at me when I say this, so feel free, audience, to laugh as well. But I think we're entering what I call our post-polish era of employer branding. For years, we've been perfecting glossy career sites and the perfectly crafted, curated employee testimonials. And I really do think that we're going to embrace and be moving away from that significantly in the years to come. And that shift is going to glorify the unfiltered, which aligns perfectly into brand, more specifically, all of our personal brands. So just know and feel confident that the future employer branding is going to be asking more of you within that, all of us, to be radically transparent, to be deeply personalized, and it's going to be increasingly employee owned. So that's how I just wanted to end in, not only should you do it, but feel empowered in it and be excited by it. Yeah.
Cece, I literally spoke with someone at our summit last week who said the exact thing, that we are
Really?
in the
Oh,
moment of like, don't take out every single little mistake, but like people
yeah.
want to see who you are. Authenticity, that word that we've brought up so many times in this conversation. So I think
Trademark it. Here we go. That's
exactly. So you
yeah.
all are spot on.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna bring up our next panel right now, but I want to say thank you to Cece, Christine, and Sienna. Thank you so much. Find these leaders on LinkedIn, reach out if you want to hear more about their
Thank
organizations or
you.
connect with them further. Once again, you can find the SHRM code here on the screen. We also posted the HRCI number in the chat, so you can find that. Sienna's going to be back at our third panel today, so you'll see her more of her in a moment. But thank you both so much, and I do want to bring up our next panel's
Everyone.
list,
Thank
which is
you.
going to be moderated by my amazing colleague Alice Simon. So, without any more further ado, we're going to switch from the reach aspect and move into the recruit aspect. So, thank you. More to come for the rest of today.